In a grimy auto shop on 54th Street in Manhattan, the air thick with the stench of gasoline and motor oil, manager Linda's voice sliced through the chaos like a knife. "Amir, who the hell do you think you are?" Her face flushed crimson. She jabbed a finger at Amir, a 20-year-old black kid standing by a beat-up motorcycle. "You fixed that guy's bike without my say-so? You're done. Pack your stuff and get out." Amir froze, his oil-stained hands clenched tight, his eyes locked on Linda's. Around him, the other mechanics went dead quiet, sneaking glances his way, but not a single one spoke up. The air compressor hissed in the corner like it was mocking him. In his greasy coveralls, Amir felt the world shrink to nothing but Linda's sneer and the silence of the guys he'd once called his crew. Just hours earlier, a man in a leather jacket, tattoos crawling up his neck, had stumbled into the shop, his voice shaking as he begged for help. "My daughter's in the hospital," he said, his eyes bloodshot and desperate. "My bike won't start. Please." The others turned away, whispering about the dangerous Hells Angels thug, but Amir stepped forward. No hesitation, because he saw something in that man's eyes, a raw pain he knew all too well. Now, standing in the middle of the shop, fired for doing the right thing, Amir's chest felt like it was caving in, but deep inside, a spark flickered, not anger, but a quiet belief that his kindness wasn't wasted. He had no idea that in just a few hours, a truth would come to light, one that would flip everything upside down and make the whole city take notice. That small act of compassion today, under the dim flicker of the shop's lights, had cracked open a door to a future nobody could have seen coming. It was a crisp Manhattan morning, the first rays of sunlight slipping through towering skyscrapers to hit the grimy storefront of the auto shop on 54th Street. Inside, the air was thick with gasoline, motor oil, and the burnt coffee stench from a rickety machine in the corner. The air compressor whined in sharp bursts, blending with the rough laughter of mechanics huddled around a pickup truck. But Amir, a 20-year-old with deep brown skin and sharp eyes, wasn't part of their banter. He was under a 2022 Ford Explorer, his grease-stained hands twisting bolts like each turn was a beat of his dream. Amir wasn't just good with cars, he was a wizard with a wrench and screwdriver. At 20, he could tear down and rebuild an engine faster than any mechanic in the shop, even the guys twice his age. But here, his talent went unnoticed. "Hey, kid," Carl, an older mechanic, barked, tossing a rag at Amir. "Grab me a 13mm wrench, pronto!" The crew erupted in laughs like it was an old joke. "But this kid's been turning screws since he was in diapers," another chimed in, voice dripping with sarcasm. Amir slid out from under the car, wiped sweat from his brow, and fetched the wrench. He didn't talk back. He'd learned silence was the only way to survive here. This shop, its hydraulic lifts, gleaming tools, and judging stares, was Amir's whole world. He'd been there 2 years, straight out of high school. No college degree, no connections. He knew he had to work twice as hard to prove himself. But every day, he felt an invisible wall between him and the others, built from his skin color, his youth, and the whispers behind his back. "He's just a quota hire," one coworker had muttered, thinking Amir didn't hear. But he heard everything. Each word was a tiny cut. Not enough to break him, but enough to weigh heavy on his heart. Back home in a cramped Harlem apartment, Amir lived with his mom, Aisha, a night shift nurse at a nearby hospital. Most nights when Amir got home, she was already at work, leaving a foil-covered plate of food on the kitchen counter and a handwritten note. "You've got this, son. I'm proud of you." Those words with his biting light. Aisha had raised him alone, working herself to the bone to cover rent, bills, and keep his dreams alive. "One day you'll have your own shop," Amir had told her over a rare shared breakfast. She'd smiled, her tired eyes sparkling. "You'll do it, Amir. But never forget, work hard and hold on to your pride." Amir's dream wasn't just a shop. It was a promise to his mom, to himself, that he'd rise above the skeptical looks, the taunts, and the days the world seemed hell-bent on pushing him down. He pictured a place of his own where skill mattered more than skin or age. But here, at the 54th Street shop, that dream felt a million miles away. He worked non-stop, tackling the toughest cars, staying late, only to hear the manager, Linda, snap, "Don't slack off, Amir. You don't want to be replaced, do you?" Linda, with her short, dyed blonde hair and icy stare, ran the shop.
She never outright discriminated, but the way she called out his name in front of customers or piled him with the dirtiest jobs said it all. Amir knew he was at the bottom of the pecking order here. Every step forward met with resistance. Unspoken rules, sidelong looks, quiet words. But he didn't quit. He worked with a stubborn faith that one day things would change. That Tuesday morning, just another day, Amir was checking an engine, wrench in hand, his mind drifting to his mom's words. Hold on to your pride. He had no clue that in just a few minutes the shop door would swing open, and a man in a leather jacket with tattoos up his neck would walk in, bringing a storm that would flip his life upside down. A man who, like Amir, was judged by the world before he even got a chance to speak.
The garage door creaked open, letting a cold gust from 54th Street sweep inside. Amir, twisting a bolt under a Ford Explorer, looked up. A tall man strode in, his heavy leather boots thumping against the concrete floor. He wore a worn-out leather jacket, snake tattoos slithering up from his collar, and on the back, Hell's Angels blazed in red like a warning sign. But it wasn't his look that caught Amir's eye. It was his eyes, bloodshot and wild, like his whole world was crumbling. "Help me, please," the man said, his voice rough, almost breaking. "My bike's dead out there. My daughter, she's in the hospital. I gotta get to her now." He stumbled to the front desk, his trembling hands gripping the counter. "Please, just fix it quick. I'll pay anything." Kim, the receptionist with glittering long nails, didn't even glance up from her phone. "Take a seat," she said flatly. "We're slammed." The man, who Amir later learned was Jake, froze like he couldn't believe he'd been brushed off. "I don't have time to wait," he nearly shouted, not angry, but desperate. "My daughter, she had an accident. I need to be there before—" His voice choked, trailing off. From the waiting area, whispers stirred. A guy in a suit, clutching a coffee cup, leaned toward his wife. "Look at that guy. Tattoos, leather, trouble for sure." A mom pulled her son closer, like Jake was a threat just to look at. The mechanics, who'd been joking moments ago, went quiet, pretending not to hear. Carl, who'd just razzed Amir, muttered to a coworker, "That guy? No way I'm touching his bike." Amir slid out from under the car, wiping his hands on his greasy coveralls. He looked at Jake and saw what no one else in the shop did, a dad fighting the fear of losing someone he loved. Amir knew that look. He'd seen it in his mom's eyes on late nights when she called to check he was safe. Without a second thought, he stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "What kind of bike you got?" Jake spun around, stunned, like he hadn't expected anyone to care. "Yamaha Cruiser. Won't start. It's parked right outside." Amir nodded, grabbed a water bottle from his workbench and handed it to Jake. "You look like you've been through hell. Drink this and I'll check your bike." Jake blinked, his shaking hands taking the bottle, muttering, "Thank you, man."
Amir stepped outside, with a sleek black Yamaha sat crooked on the curb, like Jake had stopped it in a panic. He knelt down, checking the battery, wires, and spark plugs, his hands moving swift but careful. Inside the shop, eyes started turning his way. "What's the kid doing?" Carl grumbled, voice thick with doubt. "Playing hero?" Another mechanic smirked. "Probably showing off for that biker. Dumb move." Amir heard it all, but he didn't stop. He knew what he was doing, and it wasn't just fixing a bike. He was doing what his mom always taught him. Never turn your back on someone who needs help, Amir. Kindness is the one thing no one can take from you. Checking the wires, he found a loose connection, a simple fix, done in minutes. He got to work, his mind steady, focused. Jake stood nearby, glancing at his watch, then down the street, like the hospital miles away might vanish. "She's only 12, he said low, almost to himself. "Fell off her bike. They said she's bleeding inside. I gotta be there." Amir nodded, not looking up. "I'll have it running soon. You'll make it." But as Amir stood to grab a tool from his kit, he felt the air in the shop shift. Linda, the manager, was at her office door, arms crossed, her eyes sharp as knives. She didn't say a word, but that look told Amir everything. He'd just crossed a line nobody dared touch. And that line, in this place, was drawn with prejudice and fear. Amir took a deep breath, turned back to the bike, unaware that his choice today would spark a storm, one that would change his life and expose the truth about everyone around him.
Amir's wrench clattered onto the concrete floor of the garage, shattering the stifling silence. He'd just fixed a loose connection on Jake's Yamaha, standing to wipe his grimy hands on his stained coveralls, ready for a final check. Jake, the guy in the Hells Angels leather, let out a shaky breath, his bloodshot eyes flickering with hope. "Thank you, man. I'll make it to my kid." But before Amir could respond, a voice, cold and sharp as a blade, cut through the moment. "Amir Brown, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Linda, the shop manager, stood at her office door, arms crossed, eyes blazing. Her dyed blonde hair shook with every furious step toward Amir. "Who gave you permission to fix that guy's bike? No work order, no approval, nothing." Amir turned, taking a deep breath, keeping his voice steady. "He needed help, Linda. His daughter's in the hospital. It took me a few minutes. Didn't hurt any other jobs." But Linda wasn't listening. She stormed closer, jabbing a finger in his face, her shrill voice drowning out the air compressor. "You don't get to make calls here. This is a professional shop, not a charity for some biker who looks like a damn criminal." Jake, beside his bike, clenched his fists but stayed quiet. He knew that look from Linda, the one reserved for guys like him, judged by letter, ink, and a past. Amir, though, didn't back down. "He's not a criminal," he said, voice low but firm. "He's a dad trying to get to his kid. If this was some guy in a suit or driving a BMW, would you say the same thing?" The garage went still, like the air itself held its breath. The mechanics, pretending to work, now staring openly. Kim, the receptionist, stopped tapping her nails, her mouth slightly agape. Carl, the older mechanic, muttered to a buddy, "Kid's done for." Linda's face turned beet red, stepping so close Amir could smell her cheap perfume. "You dare talk back to me?" she hissed. "You're finished, Amir. Pack your crap and get out. You're fired." The word fired hit like a sledgehammer. Amir stood frozen, the garage floor seeming to crumble beneath him. 2 years of work, late nights, early mornings, swallowing insults, all gone because he did what was right. Jake stepped forward, voice trembling. "Hey, I didn't mean to get you in trouble. I'll pay, Linda cut him off, spinning toward him. "And you, get lost before I call security."
Jake's head dropped, his eyes heavy with guilt as he glanced at Amir. "I'm sorry, kid," he whispered, pushing his bike out, vanishing into the 54th Street traffic. Amir stood alone in the shop, feeling every eye on him, but not one voice spoke up for him. Carl shrugged, turning back to his truck. Kim's nails clicked again. Customers in the waiting area buried their faces in their phones, like nothing had happened. Amir walked slowly to his workbench, opening his toolbox, each wrench and screwdriver placed neatly, as always. His hands shook, not from fear, but from a quiet rage burning in his chest. He thought of his mom, Aisha, who'd sacrificed everything for his shot at a better life. He thought of her words, "Hold on to your pride, Amir." But now that pride seemed to have cost him his future. "Yo, kid," Carl called, half joking, half mocking. "Told ya, why play hero for that biker?" Amir didn't answer. He snapped his toolbox shut, the metal clanging sharp and final. He scanned the shop, the lifts, the flickering fluorescent lights, the familiar faces who'd never been real allies. What had he done wrong? Helping a dad reach his daughter? Or daring to believe kindness mattered more than rules? As Amir slung his toolbox over his shoulder, Linda stood at her office door, lips pursed, her eyes screaming, "You deserved this." He passed her without a word, but inside, a small flame still burned. He didn't know that just in a few hours, another door would swing open, one leading to a truth and justice nobody, not even Linda, could have seen coming. But right now, under the shop's dim lights, Amir felt one thing. He'd lost everything for choosing to be human. The Harlem afternoon was bathed in a soft golden glow, like the sun was trying to comfort the dusty streets and honking cars. Amir sat on a weathered wooden bench outside his 5-story apartment, his toolbox heavy beside him, mirroring the weight in his heart. His greasy coveralls were swapped for a gray hoodie, but the faint smell of motor oil clung to his hands, a reminder of the auto shop where he'd been fired just hours ago. He stared at his calloused palms, scarred from countless wrench turns, and whispered to himself, "What did I do wrong?"
The apartment behind him was quiet, and his mom Aisha was pulling another night shift at the hospital. Amir thought of her, those late nights when she'd drag herself home, feet aching, still managing a smile and saying, "You've got this, Amir." But now he wasn't so sure. No job, no money. His dream of owning his own shop felt further away than ever. He pulled a small wrench from his pocket, a gift from his uncle when he started as a mechanic, and spun it in his hands, hoping it held answers to the questions swirling in his head. Suddenly, his phone buzzed in his pocket, shattering the stillness. An unknown number. Amir hesitated, thinking it might be Linda with one last jab, but he answered, voice weary. "Hello? Amir Brown?" A deep, steady voice came through. "This is Ellison, CEO of the auto shop chain. I need you back at the shop now." Amir sat up, heart racing. "CEO? Sir, I got fired this morning." Ellison's tone didn't waver. "I know, but we've got some things to clear up. You coming?" Amir gazed down the street where yellow taxis zipped by carrying Manhattan's relentless pulse. Questions flooded his mind. Why was the CEO calling him directly? Was this about Jake, the Hells Angels guy I helped, or just some final paperwork to kick him out for good? But something in Ellison's voice, not anger, but urgency, made it impossible to say no. He stood, slinging his toolbox over his shoulder, feeling like a soldier heading into a battle with an unknown enemy. As he walked, the fading sunlight hit his face, highlighting his sharp but tired eyes. He thought back to that morning, Jake's grateful look before he left. "Thank you," Jake had said, and Amir felt the rare sincerity in those words. But he also remembered Linda's icy glare, like she wanted to erase his worth. Now, heading back to the shop, his heart pounded, not from fear, but from a gut feeling that something big was waiting. He had no clue that at the 54th Street shop, a truth was about to unravel, one that would flip his fate and force everyone who'd looked down on him to take a hard look at themselves. As Amir moved through familiar streets, a small flame flickered in his chest, the pride his mom always urged him to hold tight. Whatever came next, he knew he'd chosen to be a decent man, and that was something no one could steal. The late afternoon air in the 54th Street auto shop felt electric, like the world was holding its breath for something huge. Amir pushed through the familiar glass doors, his toolbox weighing heavy on his shoulder, heart thumping like a jackhammer. Just hours ago, he left this place a failure, fired for daring to do what was right. Now he was back, no idea what was waiting. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, the smell of gas and oil sting sharp, but the mechanic's eyes, Carl, Kim, and the rest, tracked him now, sneaky like he was a riddle they couldn't crack. A crisp assistant in a neat blue shirt led Amir down a narrow hallway to the conference room at the back of the shop. The heavy oak doors swung open, and Amir stepped inside, sensing the shift instantly. The small room with its long wooden table and faint coffee scent was unlike anywhere he'd been in this shop. At the table's end stood Mr. Ellison, CEO of the auto chain, tall and commanding, his salt and pepper hair catching the light, eyes sharp but not cold. Beside him was Jake, the Hells Angels guy with tattoos and grit, but now standing tall, no trace of the panic from this morning. His leather jacket hung over a chair, like he was done letting it define him. "Amir, take a seat," Ellison said, his voice warm, gesturing to the chair across from him. Amir sat, toolbox by his feet, hands clenched to hide his nerves. "Sir, I'm not sure why I'm here," he started, voice cautious. "I got fired this morning for fixing a—" He glanced at Jake, unsure what to call him. Jake gave a small smile, the first time Amir saw him relax. "Just call me Jake," he said, turning to Ellison. "This guy saved my bacon today, big brother." Amir blinked, his brain short-circuiting for a second. "Big brother?" he echoed, barely a whisper. Ellison nodded, settling into his chair, hands clasped on the table. "Jake is my brother," he said, calm but heavy, like a truth you can't argue with. "We grew up together, wrenching cars in a rundown Brooklyn shop before I built this chain. Jake took a different path, but he's still my brother. Today when he walked in here, desperate for his little girl, most of my crew turned their backs. They saw leather, tattoos, and a threat. But you, Amir, saw a person." Amir's throat tightened. He remembered Jake's desperate eyes, his plea for his daughter. "I just did what needed doing," he said, voice low. "Anyone would have." Jake shook his head, eyes glinting. Nah, you're wrong. Now one soul in this shop lifted a finger, except you. Because of you, I got to the hospital in time. My girl. She's okay now. She's out of the woods. Warmth spread through Amir's chest, like a weight had lifted. He hadn't known Jake's daughter was safe, and that news made it all, the taunts, the sneers, even getting fired, worth it. But Ellison wasn't done. He stood, stepping to the table's edge, eyes locked on Amir. You didn't just fix a bike, Amir. You gave my brother a chance to be with his kid. That's worth more to me than any rule in this shop. Amir ducked his head, hiding the emotions welling up. He thought of his mom, Aisha, her words echoing, "Kindness is the one thing no one can take from you." But Ellison kept going, his voice now firm with resolve. "I checked your record. 2 years, not a single complaint. Customers love you, and your skills outshine guys twice your age. But today, you got fired for doing the right thing. That says a lot, not just about you, but about this place." Amir looked up, meeting Ellison's gaze. Something in his tone felt like more than an apology, like a promise. Jake nodded beside him, eyes full of gratitude. "You saw me, Amir, not some biker, but me, a dad. I won't forget that." As Ellison sat back down, he rested his hand on the table, his voice dropping, like he was gearing up for something bigger. "Amir, I didn't call you here just to say thanks. I want to make this right, and I want you to be part of it." Amir's heart raced, a gut feeling that the door he thought was slammed shut was creaking open, not just for him, but for everything he believed in. But he didn't know yet that the next moment would shake this shop and even him to its core. In the cramped meeting room of the garage on 54th Street, the air hung heavy, like a thunderstorm waiting to break. The flickering fluorescent lights cast a pale glow across the old wooden table, its surface scarred and worn, like the room itself had survived 1,000 battles. Amir sat across from Mr. Ellison, CEO of the garage chain, and Jake, the Hells Angels biker who had just been revealed as his younger brother. Ellison's words still echoed in Amir's mind. "You did the right thing, Amir. You saw a human being when everyone else only saw a threat." But before Amir could even process the praise, the door swung open, and Linda stepped inside. With her bleached blonde hair and sharp, calculating eyes, she froze at the sight of Amir. Her lips tightened, like she'd just walked into a situation she hadn't prepared for. "Mr. Ellison," she said, trying to steady her voice, keeping it clipped and professional. "You asked for me?" She glanced sideways at Amir, her gaze cold, tinged with the same contempt she had worn just hours earlier when she'd kicked him out of this very garage. Mr. Ellison rose from his seat, tall and broad, his eyes no longer warm as they'd been with Amir. "Linda," he began, his voice low but laced with steel. "Today, when my brother walked into this garage, desperate because his daughter was in the hospital, what did you do?" Linda blinked, stepping back like the weight of his words had pushed her physically. I didn't know he was your brother," she stammered. "He looked like a dangerous biker. I was just following protocol." "Protocol?" Ellison repeated, his tone quieter now but far more powerful. "Your protocol was to turn away a father begging for help? To fire a mechanic who did the right thing?" He stepped closer, his stare unwavering. "Amir fixed Jake's car in minutes. Not for money, not for credit, but out of kindness. And you, Linda, you chose judgment over compassion. That's not how we do things here." Amir sat silently, his chest tight, watching the woman who had made him feel so small, so unworthy, now standing pale and trembling. Jake, seated next to him, lowered his head, but the look he gave Linda wasn't anger, it was disappointment. "I don't blame you for being afraid of how I look," Jake said, his voice rough. "But you were wrong to fire him. Amir saw me for what I am, a father, not a Hell's Angel." Linda opened her mouth, maybe to defend herself, but Ellison raised his hand. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Linda, your actions today were discriminatory, and there's no place for that in this company. You're fired, effective immediately." The word "fired" hit the room like thunder. Linda froze, her face drained from red to pale. You can't do that," she whispered,
her voice weak, like even she knew there was no way back. Amir looked at her, but he felt no satisfaction, no vindication, just a quiet ache as memories flashed back. The dismissive comments, the condescending stares, the dirtiest jobs always assigned to him. He thought of his mother, Aisha, who once told him, "Justice isn't revenge, Amir. Justice is setting things right." And in this moment, this worn, fluorescent-lit room, justice was being served, not just for him, but for everything he stood for. Linda turned and walked out, the sound of her heels echoing sharply against the tile floor. When the door clicked shut, Mr. Ellison turned back to Amir, his gaze now softer. "Amir," he said, "you deserve a chance to lead. I want you to be the new lead technician at this garage. You can change this place, make it better, make it fair." Jake nodded, his eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "You saved my little girl, and I'll never forget that." A swell of emotions surged in Amir, surprise, pride, and a trace of fear. He had never imagined this moment, being recognized by a CEO, thanked by a man like Jake. But deep down, he heard his mother's voice again. "Hold on to your dignity, Amir." And he knew, whatever came next, he'd keep that fire alive. The door to justice had opened, but his journey of changing this garage, and maybe even himself, was only just beginning.
The meeting room on 54th Street fell into silence after Linda's heels faded down the hall, a sharp echo of the past fading away. The fluorescent lights now fell on Amir, illuminating his eyes. Not the eyes of a mechanic who had been dismissed and underestimated, but the eyes of a man who had just been handed a chance to change everything. Mr. Ellison, CEO of the garage chain, settled back into his chair. His expression softened, but his gaze carried quiet expectation. Jake, the man once judged by his leather jacket and tattoos, looked at Amir with a genuine smile as if to say, "You earned this." "Amir," Ellison said, his voice deep and steady, "I told you I want you to be lead technician, but I don't want you to just do the work. I want you to lead, to build a garage where people are judged by what they do, not how they look or where they come from. What do you say?" Amir lowered his head slightly, his hand still gripping the worn tool bag at his feet. Lead technician, a title he had never dared to dream of, not at 20, not without a college degree, not with the constant skeptical stares that seemed to follow him everywhere. He thought of his mother, Aisha, the woman who taught him that dignity was a fire you never let go out. He thought of the shifts under Linda's disapproving gaze, the insults from Carl, and the moment he fixed Jake's car. Not for praise, not for pay, but because he just couldn't turn away from someone in need. I'm honored, sir," Amir said, his voice a little shaky, but growing stronger with each word. "But I have one condition." Ellison raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised. Jake leaned in, curious. "Go ahead," Ellison encouraged. Amir took a deep breath and stood, shoulders squared, as if facing not just the CEO, but the years of being overlooked. "I want this garage to change," he said. "I want it to be a place where everyone, black, white, in leather or in suits, gets respect. I want our mechanics to be judged on skill, not stereotypes. If I'm going to lead this place, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it stands for something." Silence filled the room, but not the heavy kind. This was the silence of understanding, of something landing right where it needed to. Ellison smiled, a rare, honest smile, like he had just found exactly what he'd been looking for. "You're the man for the job," he said. "It's settled. You start Monday." Jake got to his feet and gave Amir a firm pat on the shoulder. "You're going to be great, man," he said, his voice rough but warm. "And if anybody gives you trouble, just call me." He winked, and for the first time in a long while, Amir smiled, a real smile, gentle but full of hope. He felt a new kind of weight on his shoulders, not a burden, but a responsibility, not just to himself, but to everyone who had ever been judged like him, or like Jake. As Amir walked out of the meeting room, the sunset outside painted the waiting cars in gold. He looked at them, not as lifeless machines anymore, but as possibilities,
as chances to prove that talent and compassion could break through any barrier. He thought of his mother, of his dream to one day own his own shop, and in that moment, he realized he didn't need to wait. He didn't need his own garage to start changing the world. Right here, on 54th Street, was where it began. Amir reached into his pocket and gripped the small wrench his uncle had given him, a keepsake from another time. He whispered to himself, "Mom was right. No one can take your dignity away." And then he stepped out of the garage, not as the guy who'd been fired, but as a trailblazer, a man ready to rewrite not just his story, but maybe, just maybe, everyone else's too. Monday morning on 54th Street looked brighter than usual, not because of the sunlight filtering through the garage windows, but because of something less visible, yet far more powerful: change. Amir stood at the center of the concrete floor, not in greasy overalls, but in a crisp, dark blue shirt, a Lee technician badge gleaming proudly on his chest. He looked around, the lifts, the toolboxes, the familiar layout, and the faces of the mechanics, who now stared back at him with a mix of curiosity and newfound respect. Carl, who once cracked jokes at Amir's expense, gave him a silent nod. Kim, the receptionist who used to tap her nails in irritation, offered him a quiet smile. The air no longer smelled of tension. It carried the faint scent of possibility. Amir picked up a wrench, but not to fix a car. This time, he was guiding a young mechanic named Miguel, fresh on the team. "You see this wiring?" Amir said, voice calm, easy. "Check the connection first. Don't rush to replace the whole thing. Do it right, and the customer will trust you." Miguel nodded, eyes lighting up like he just discovered his first real mentor. Amir smiled, remembering himself 2 years ago, stepping into this same garage with nothing but a dream and the sting of doubt in every sideways glance. In just a few weeks, Amir had changed the garage in ways no one had expected. He started training sessions, open to every mechanic, no matter their rank or background. He wrote new guidelines. Customers would be helped based on what they needed, not how they looked. One day, an elderly woman came in with a beat-up old car, visibly anxious about the cost. Amir personally inspected it and charged her only the minimum. "Don't worry, man," he said as he handed back her keys. "We're here to help." The woman's eyes welled with tears. She thanked him over and over. That one moment, quiet and genuine, began to spread. Word got out. New customers came, drawn not just by service, but by something rarer: integrity. After work, Amir often headed home earlier than before to have dinner with his mother, Aisha. One evening, over a warm plate of stew, she reached across the table and took his hand. "I always knew you'd do something great," she said, her voice trembling with pride. Amir smiled and told her about Miguel, about how the garage was changing, about how his dream of opening his own shop didn't feel so far away anymore. "But first," he added, "I want to make this garage a place where everyone gets a shot." Aisha nodded, her eyes glowing with the same fire she'd passed on to him as a boy. One afternoon, Jake stopped by, not in his Hells Angels jacket, but in a simple button-down shirt. By his side was his 12-year-old daughter, Mia, now fully recovered from the accident. Mia ran straight to Amir, beaming, and threw her arms around him. "Thank you, mister," she said, slipping a drawing into his hand. It was a colorful sketch of the garage, with bold words written across the top. "My dad's hero." Jake clapped a hand on Amir's shoulder, his eyes filled with something deeper than gratitude. "You did it, man. This place, it's different now." Amir stepped outside and looked down the busy stretch of 54th Street, feeling the heartbeat of Manhattan sync with his own. He pulled out the small wrench from his pocket, the one his uncle had given him, the one he'd carried through every step of this journey. He rolled it between his fingers and whispered to himself, "It's not who you are that defines you, it's what you do." Those words, like a quiet flame, didn't just light his own path, they lit the way for others too. From Miguel to Mia to every customer still to come. This garage, and Amir, had become living proof that dignity and compassion could change a small world, one moment at a time.